here we are then, on to the second section. So what we're going to do is we're going to be painting, as I said, the Triarchal Phaerons, Szarekh himself, and Szarekh's cloak. As you can see, I've got them all mounted on their own little 32mm bases. I've actually just secured them on there with a bit of blue tack, but you could use a bit of super glue. Don't use plastic glue, because you will melt. You'll basically be gluing them together properly, but if you use a little bit of super glue, it's easier to snap it off. I've also mounted his cloak on a separate bit, just because I want to make things a little bit easier for myself. And happily, you've got this nice flat edge that actually, once you stick it down on the model, you'll never see that flat underside ever again. So what we are going to do is, rather than start in one of the obvious places like Szarekh or one of the two Triarchal Phaerons, we are going to start with the cloak. Who saw that coming, eh? So the place we're going to start with on Szarekh's cloak is we want to get it to that nice shiny colour that you can see on the box art. And so the colour that we're going to use is some thinned down iron hand steel. Now you could prime this guy in lead belcher if you wanted to, but you always want to get it to this nice bright silver, so it kind of doesn't really matter if you do. It might take a couple of thin coats. To get it nice and shiny. And with that iron hand steel all applied, what we now want to do is we want to paint in the little clasps holding in place the glowing gems. So what we're going to do is we're going to use some thinned down Retributor Armour. And we just want to get this all over these little sections here. Like this. And with that done, what we're now going to do is we're going to add some of that green. And so the colour that we're going to use is Tesseract Glow. And what we want to do is we want to be very careful with this. So we don't want to use loads at a time. And what we want to do is we want to pick out all the little squares with this colour. And we just want to connect them, as well as darkening down any of those little square recesses, so like where the data has come out. Now you don't want to do like the whole section of the panel of the area. Like what we want to do is we want to leave like kind of a bit of iron hand steel just poking through in like the middle, like I've done there. So like down here we're okay, we're good to go. We can just add this Tesseract Glow like that, and just want to pull it out a little bit. What we want to avoid is using so much that we end up with like that really kind of built up area that you get with the Tesseract Glow. We're just basically staining these bits. So you can see there's a little too much in there, so I just need to mop that up. Because I'm, as I say, just staining these sections with Tesseract Glow like that. Just want to go around doing this from all of these little squarey areas. And just avoid any really large build-ups. Just by pulling off all the excess. And with that Tesseract Glow all applied, what we now want to do is we want to add all of that slightly darker shading. Now the colour that we're going to make is a roughly 10 parts contrast medium to 1 part Akhelian Green. And we want this to just be a really, really, really thin Akhelian Green. And we don't want to use loads at a time. And what we want to do is basically for the inside of the cloak, we just want to do an all over coat of this going all over, which is exactly what I mean by an all over coat. Like this. As I say, we're just going all over the whole of the inside of the cloak, including over the top of that Tesseract Glow that we've done. Like this. And similarly, with that applied all on the inside, what we now want to do is we're going to take our same mix again. Way too much on my thumb palette there. I just want to take some of this off. And what we want to do on the outside of the cloak is we want to basically apply this to all of the darkest recesses and folds in the cloak, whilst effectively maintaining the iron hand steel layer like this. And what we want to do is just in places around on the green glow stuff, just want to add little bits of it here and there like this. So around here on this bit, just add a little bit like that, like that, like that. Like so. A little bit in there. And really that bit is just entirely up to you. That's just personal choice. As you can see, there's a darker recess just there. And then we got a little bit of greeny glow down there. So we just want to go around doing this. And with that done, what we want to do is exactly the same thing again. Only this time, when we're on the outside, we want the shading to be a little bit narrower. So it's once again 10 parts contrast medium to 1 part Akhelian Green. And we're just going to load up our brush and we're going to go for it once again. So, but this time, actually, when we're doing the inside of the cloak, just want to be a little bit more considered when we get close to loads of that green, that Tesseract Glow that we've already shaded once. We don't want to completely destroy the effect, whereas if we layer up too much over the top, we will lose some of that Tesseract Glow. But as you can see, that's already, as a second coat, darkened down the silver quite a lot. And with that second coat applied, what we now want to do is we want to create a roughly 10 parts contrast medium, 1 part Akhelian Green and 1 part Terradon Turquoise mix. And mostly this is just going to be used for the inside of the cloak. So what we want to do is in the absolute darkest recesses, we want to once again just bring down that colour even more. And we only want to go up to around about there. So we want this front part and this front part here to remain a little bit brighter than the rest of the inside of the cloak. So just want to keep going, getting this all over. like this. And then next up, what we're going to do is we're going to use a little bit of Gryph Grey. And this is just going to be for the outside of the cloak, not the inside. We're going to get that nice and dark in just a second. So you want to use a small amount of Gryph Grey here. And all we want to do is you just want to draw this in to the absolute deepest recesses of those folds in the fabric. Like that. And this just gives that shadow a little bit more oomph, as it were. You see? And with that done, what we now want to do, just to finish off the inside of that cloak in terms of the shading, is we want to create a roughly 9 parts contrast medium to 1 part Terradon Turquoise to 1 part Dark Angel's Green mix. And we want to use this once again all over just this main part of the inside of the cloak, just to make it really dark but still retaining that metallic quality to it. And with that done, whilst we're waiting for that to dry, we're actually going to start highlighting. Now, all of the highlighting that we're going to do on the metallics is going to be on the outside, so we don't need to worry about the inside just for now. And what we're going to create is a roughly 1-to-1 mix of Iron Hand Steel and Stormhost Silver. I'm going to use this to apply a slightly subtle highlight on the sharpest parts of the cloak itself. So we just want to firstly pick out the hard edges. They're easy to spot, so we just want to get these ones around here, like this. But what we also want to do is pick out any of the light catching areas. You can see one right there. So you just want to paint this mixture over the top like that, just to really strengthen that up. And with that done, what we want to do now is use some Stormhost Silver on its own and just apply this to the sharpest corners of each of those highlights. And with that metallic highlight applied, what we now want to do is we want to use a small amount of Corax White. We want to use this to pick out some of the edges, not all of them, but some of the edges on the raised squares around the model. And with that done, well, look at how shiny and lovely that cloak is. So, what we're now going to do is going to use some Basilicanum Grey. We want to be really careful here. So what we want to do is we want to use this to shade that gold that we painted in a little while ago. And with that Basilicanum Grey applied, what we're now going to do is we're going to use a small amount of Sycorax Bronze. And we're going to use this to highlight all of that gold. With that Sycorax Bronze applied, what we now want to do is finish off the cloak using some Tesseract Glow over the top of these shiny gems. And with that done, well, I've got the brush in my mouth. With that done, the cloak is finished. So what we're going to do is going to put that to one side for now. And we are now going to paint Szarekh, the king himself. And the colour that we're going to use first is Retributor Armour. And what we want to do, I'm just going to add a little bit more of this to my thinned down Retributor Armour because it's a bit too thin. There we go. So what we want to do with this is we basically want to cover this all over him. So we want to get this over his armour, and we want to get it over his joints. We don't want to put it on any of those cables, and we don't want it on the spear or staff, or on the cartouche in the middle, or on this area here. There's like his tabard. But what we do want to do is we want to get it all over the armour and all over the joints. And with that done, what we now want to do is we want to take some Basilicanum Grey. We want to use this to shade all of the joints and all of the dark recesses. So we want to shade areas like his hip bone, just there. Areas like this spinal column type area here. Like so. But what we also want to do, we want to use this Basilicanum Grey to shade areas such as the dark vents there. And with that done, just before we do any kind of specific highlights, what we are going to do is we're going to re-layer up all the areas that still remain Retributor Armour, except for the headdress. Don't worry about that for now. Now the colour that we're going to make is a roughly 1:1:1 mix of Runelord Brass, Retributor Armour and Stormhost Silver. And this is because what we want is we want a sort of worn out gold. And what we want to do is we want to take this mix and we want to start applying this over the top of all of that Retributor Armour that we haven't shaded with the Basilicanum Grey, like this. And with that done, what we now want to do is we want to create a roughly 2 parts Stormhost Silver to 1 part Runelord Brass mix. And we basically want to do the same thing again over the top of all of this gold armour. Like this. Once again, we're just leaving those joints and things that we shaded with the Basilicanum Grey. You only need to do 1 layer of this. You won't need to do 2, because it actually pays to have a little bit of that previous layer just shining through a little bit. As you can see, that's already the right colour for what we want. What we're also going to do is we're going to use this same mix. We're going to apply it along the tabard, just trying to avoid the little nodules in the middle. Like so. And we also want to apply this to the top bands. Like this on the headdress. So you've got that little area there. And on the large, I guess his horn, maybe. I'm going to apply it there like that. And like this. And then on certain areas, the best place to concentrate this is on the face, because we want to colour in basically the front part. So like this area here, and this area here. But we just want to leave our previous layer shining through on the side, and in that kind of any areas of shadow. So you see underneath the horn, just there, I've left it as it is. This is just to create some natural variance in the metallic that gives us a nice kind of subtle shading without actually having to apply any shading. Like that. Similarly on the leg here underneath, just want to go up to, but don't include the kind of the ridge area just there. Just want to start again over on the top. So you just want to go around like this, picking out these areas with this colour, and then we'll come back. And with that done, what we now want to do is highlight all of the areas that we shaded with Basilicanum Grey with some Sycorax Bronze. Like that. And with that done, what we now want to do is we want to shade this tabard part and his headdress. Now the first colour we're going to use for this is Guilliman Flesh. And what we want to do is we want to get this Guilliman Flesh all over the headdress like this. Giving us our first shaded colour. Like this. And we want to do both sides, but what we also want to do is just take a small amount of this. We just want to add it around about halfway along those outside bits. There like that. And there like that. So if you look at the box art, there's a small amount of shading just on those outside parts of the headdress. I want to do that on both sides, but don't worry about that horn. It's probably not a horn, I just keep calling it a horn. Anyway, what we also want to do is on the tabard. So we want to just start round about at the bottom with quite a solid coat of this Guilliman Flesh, coming out to round about here. So it starts a lot stronger at the bottom, then it's a lot lighter of a colour at the top, like that, you see. I want to do the same thing on the other side. So we take a little brushful and we start at the bottom. We want it to be quite dark. Just using a single brushful, we just steadily make our way up. And with that done, what we now want to do is we want to add that gradual fade that comes from the top of the headdress down towards the bottom and across the middle / bottom of the tabard. Now what we're going to do is the first thing we're going to create is a roughly 4 parts contrast medium to 1 part Gore Grunta Fur mix. What we want to do with this mix is just over the top of where we've done that Guilliman Flesh. So you just want to add this brown mix like this, going down towards the bottom, just leaving a small amount of that Guilliman Flesh mix shining through towards the bottom, as you can see, like that. Then what we do is we wash our brush, and then we take a small amount of Wildwood, and just whilst it's still wet, you just want to dab it on towards the top, like this, until we're happy with how dark the colour is. And you want to go quite quickly here, because you don't want that contrast medium to dry out. Like that. You see? You just want to keep going until you're happy with it. I'm reasonably happy with that. And similarly, down here, you just want to pick an area to start this on. So you just want to kind of add this over the top, like this, going up to around about halfway on the second from top. And then once again, taking some Wildwood and using this just to darken it down in certain areas towards the bottom, like that. You keep going until you get it to the darkness that you want it to be. And with that fade established, well, you can see it looks pretty cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to finish off all of these metallics now by adding a highlight of Stormhost Silver. So you just want to pick out all of the edges like this, including across those highlights that we've done, that fade that we've done. Just want to be a little bit careful now, especially around any of that glyph work on the headdress. You essentially just want to go all over, picking out these areas with the Stormhost Silver. And with that done, the unique armor features of Szarekh the Silent King are now finished. So what we're going to do is we're going to now start doing all three of the characters, so the Triarchal Phaerons as well. And the colour that we're going to start with is Terradon Turquoise, and this is going to be for all of the black details, or rather all of the smooth black details. Now if you've seen any of my Indomitus tutorials, you'll know what's about to happen next. So what we want to do is we want to take this Terradon Turquoise and we want to coat this all over any areas that we want to be black. So on Szarekh, we want to do areas like the staff, I guess you'd call it a wrap. Though not really. I don't see why a Necron would need a soft wrap for his hands. I'm just going to finish this off before demonstrating on the Triarchal Phaerons, because we never want to leave a contrast section unfinished, because if we let it dry, we end up with a nasty streak line where we then pick it back up again. Like that. So we want to use areas like this on the staff. There's a little cat hair there. And we want to do the cartouche in the middle, as well as the area here on his staff as well. So that little symbol there and the outstretched sparks or spokes. So that's on Szarekh. And then on the Triarchal Phaerons, it's a very similar deal. What we want to do, we'll take the Terradon Turquoise. Again, we want to pick out all the areas that we want to be this lovely smooth black. So areas like the cartouches on their chest, like that. And the staff wraps, as well as any of the soft black details. So areas like their large abdominal spinal columns. like this. And with that Terradon Turquoise applied, just before we add any of the black, what we're going to do is we're going to colour in all the parts that we want to be silver, as well as all the parts that we want to be industrial black. Now, there aren't any industrial black parts on Szarekh himself, but there are on the Phaerons. So what we're going to do is, firstly, we're going to use some thinned down Iron Warriors. I'm going to use this just on Szarekh to colour in all of the parts that we want to be silver. So if you need help, just check out the box art, but it is mostly going to be places. In fact, it is only going to be the working areas of his staff. We just want to be careful around that blade. You don't want to get this Iron Warriors on there, but if you do, you can always neaten it back up. You just want to get this all over like this, as well as on the ribbed cables around his tummy. You don't want to get this on the smooth cables. But again, if you do, just neaten it back up. Like that. So we just want to do this bit, this little bit, the vents, and the containers here, as well as this large area like this on Szarekh. Whereas on our Phaerons, what we want to do is we want to use this to colour in all of the silver parts, but also, as I say, all of the areas we want to be the industrial black. So this is going to be areas like the open joints on his legs, on his elbows, on his knees, and areas like that, as well as this extra bit of like full-on spinal column here, like that. And as for the silver bits, similarly to the staff on Szarekh, we want to colour in all of the bits that we want to be silver, like so. And with that done, what we now want to do is we want to add the Black Templar. So what we're going to do is we're going to pop that aside one side just for a second. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the Black Templar on our brush. We don't want to take loads at a time. Because what we want to do is over the top of the Terradon Turquoise at least, is we want to add this Black Templar to the flats of the panels without hitting any of the edges, to give ourselves our first edge highlight on all of that black. Like that. Similarly just along here. As you can see, that Terradon Turquoise just shining through gives us a lovely green edge highlight on the black. And similarly on the staff, what we want to do is just start coating in all the flats of the panels. Like this. Like that. Similarly, on these guys, we want to do the same thing on the Terradon Turquoise areas, but we also, over the top of any of the areas that we want to be industrial black, such as the joints, we just want to cover this Black Templar all over to give it a really, really dark metal effect, like that. And with that done, as you can see, we've got some really distinct looking blacks on all three of the models. Not necessarily on him, we've only got the one, but on these guys, you've got the two very distinct looking blacks on both of them. So what we're going to do now is we're actually just going to put Szarekh to one side because he's actually nearly done, which I know sounds weird, but we want to get all three to a point where we're in a position to finish. So what we're going to do next is we're just going to focus on these guys and we're going to get their armor done. So the first color that we're going to use is Runelord Brass. And what we want to do is have some thin down on our palette. And we just want to take this Runelord Brass. We want to start coating this all over their armor panels. And with that Runelord Brass applied, well, it's now time to add some shade to both of these guys. Don't worry about Szarekh. He's fine. He's chilling over there. He's all good. So what we are going to do is we are going to start by shading in these ornate bits coming down the front here on both of these guys, including the little runic details on their chests. Now the colour that we're going to use for this is Cryptek Armourshade Gloss. And that's because we want this to have a slightly different tone to the rest of the miniature. We want them to be nice and shiny. So we just want to take our Cryptek Armourshade Gloss and start painting this all over the top like that, just working it into all those recesses, making sure we get a good even color coverage. Like that. And with that Cryptek Armourshade Gloss applied, it's now time to shade the rest of the brass armor. Now the color that we're going to make is a roughly 6 parts contrast medium to 1 part Aggaros Dunes to 1 part Wildwood mix. And we're just going to take this paint and we're going to start putting this all over the rest of that bronze armor. Brass armor. I always get that confused. It's been a while since I've filmed a Necron tutorial, and I'm still getting it mixed up. So we just want to make sure that we get this all over. We want to include the tabard in this. I'm not doing anything particularly fancy with these ones. And with that applied, we've now got some lovely worn out brass armor. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply our final shade, and this is going to be some Basilicanum Grey. And we're going to do this on Szarekh, but we're also going to do it on all three. And we want to use this Basilicanum Grey over all of the remaining silver details. So areas such as the area on his staff. Areas such as the area. Good lord. So we just want to cover over all of that Iron Warriors that we originally painted in, like so. And the one point of interest to note on here is this little glyph up here at the top. You can see it just there. We actually don't want to cover any Basilicanum Grey over the top of that, because we want that to be a different colour. And with all those shades applied, it's now time to start brightening up that armour once again, and of course that silver. What we are going to start with is we are going to start with the armour on these two gentlemen. I think people keep referring to them as Waldorf and Sadler. So what we're going to do first is we are going to thin down some Sycorax Bronze. We're going to use this in a couple of areas. We're going to use a slightly smaller brush than that one. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our thinned down Sycorax Bronze. And firstly, what we want to do is we just want to layer up this Sycorax Bronze over the top of those shoulder pads, just avoiding any battle damage or any of the darkest recesses. There's a little bit of battle damage there. Like that. like this. Just to give us a nice bright shoulder pad, like that. Just gonna make sure that I get right in here to finish off the area, like that. What we also don't want to do is we want to use this to brighten up the outside areas on the little headdress type thing, like that. And we want to use it on the head as well. And so what we want to do on the heads, we want to brighten up the front of the head, like that. We've got this front panel here. Get a good layer all over like this. But on the sides, what we want to do is just want to colour in the back part, leaving where the Runelord Brass and the shade is settled in that recess, like that. And with that done, what we now want to do is we want to highlight all of these areas with some Canoptek Alloy. And we want to do all of the armour. So we want to do all of the brass that we originally shaded and haven't added any Sycorax Bronze over. But we also want to highlight all the areas that we've just added that Sycorax Bronze to. Like this. And with that done, as you can see, all of our armour is now finished across all three. What I've also done, just in case you hadn't noticed, is all the little cartouches and things that are around him, so all the little sigils across all three, including on Szarekh, I've also coloured in with the Canoptek Alloy. So, with all of that done, what we are now going to do is we're going to highlight all of the silver and all of the industrial black. And the colour that we're going to be using for that is Iron Hand Steel. Now we're going to do the highlights in a couple of different ways. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with Szarekh. I'm just going to put these two to one side just for now. And on Szarekh, what we're going to do is we're going to take our thinned down Iron Hand Steel. And we just want to basically add a layer of this over the top, avoiding any of the darkest recesses. Like that, to make it nice and bright. It's the same again. The other side. Just avoiding those darkest recesses. Like that. So as you can see, we get this lovely bright silver. And it's the same up the top here. It's again just avoiding where that Basilicanum Grey is settled. Like so. Same again on the vents here. So you just want to finish off all of that kind of silver like that. And it's the same deal on him as it is on these guys. So once again, we take our Iron Hand Steel and we just add this all over the weapon details, just avoiding any of that dark area, including that little bit of battle damage just there. Like so. We want to do the same thing on the other side. Like that. But what we also want to do on these guys is we want to highlight areas such as the spinal column at the top here. So we just want to add a little bit of a highlight around any of the edges, rather than do a full layer. like that kind of thing, as you can see. And then on all of the industrial black that we originally painted with Iron Warriors and then shaded with the Black Templar, we want to do a highlight as well. And with that done, what we now want to do is just to finish off this kind of metallic series, is we want to use some Stormhost Silver, just to add some highlights to all of those silver areas that we've done with the Iron Hand Steel. Just to give it a nice and bright shine, like this. And with that Stormhost Silver applied to those bright silver details, what we're going to do now is we're going to highlight all of the black. And the colour that we're going to use for this is Fenrisian Grey. Like that. And with that done, well, our three chaps are very nearly finished. So what we are going to now work on is we're going to work on all of the green glowingness, including the blades and all of the little orbs and stuff. Just as a quick point of reference, on the Silent King himself, we're just going to ignore the black stone there just for a second. The recipe for the black stone is exactly the same as what we've just done on the throne, but yeah, we're just ignoring it just for now. We're not including that in this bit. So what we want to do first is we want to neaten up any mistakes that we've made and also brighten up any of these blades and things. And the colour that we're going to use for this is some thinned down Corax White. And so what we want to do is just want to take our Corax White, just start painting this all over these details. So on the Silent King, we want to do this on all over the staff blades. We don't want to do the Blackstone, as I've already mentioned. We want to do all of the orbs. So you've got one in here, just in there. And we want to do his eyes. We want to do the glowing ones on his back and in his legs, and on the tabard, at the bottom of the spear, and on here. And with that Corax White applied, it's now time to do a whole lot of green work. So what we're going to do is we're going to work on the Silent King, but we're going to do these two as well at the same time. Now the first colour we're going to use is of course Tesseract Glow, and well, the method for doing this is pretty similar to what we did on the Catan on Szarakh's throne. But we're going to cover it slightly differently here because the technique's a little bit different. So what we do, as we say, is we're using Tesseract Glow first. And we want to take a fair amount of this on our brush, and we want to start painting this over all the areas we want to be green. So in this case, we want to do this all over the blades as well, which I know is something I haven't done in the previous tutorials. We just want to do this as our first base coat, like this. So we're just being very smooth as we would normally with a contrast paint, rather than just kind of flinging it all over. Because we want this to be a nice and smooth coat. We just want to mop up any excess because we don't want there to be any kind of really kind of massive blobs of this. And with that Tesseract Glow all applied, what we now want to do is we want to add that shading and that kind of non-metallic metal energy coruscating type thing over the top. So the colour that we're going to make is a roughly 6 parts contrast medium to 1 part warp lightning. We want to take a small amount of this on our brush, and we want to use this to basically draw out the areas that we want to have the darker shading. So essentially what we want to do is we want to very carefully and very gently draw in our sections like this in the areas that we want them to be. So that's the first one. We then want to do a little bit of it just kind of coming down here. You just want to be careful about having any dark blobs. Just use your brush to kind of move it around. And then we want to add a little bit of it down here. And then similarly on this little bit down here, just want to add some of this warp lightning just there across that top part like that. Now don't worry if it looks a little bit weird. We are going to start blending it out and kind of making it feel a little bit more natural. But for now, we are just drawing out these sections. And with that done, well, we've now got our sections marked out on the blades. So what we're going to do is we're going to now strengthen up these colors, and we're going to use the same mix again, 6 parts contrast medium to 1 part warp lightning. And what we want to do is we want to add some darker shading across those areas that we originally colored in. But we don't want to do the whole area. We just want to leave a little bit at the end poking through, just to give it that little bit of a fade from the first coat to the second. Similarly again, there's a little bit too much on my brush here for this bit. Just want to add a little bit there going across the middle, like that. And the same down here, just to strengthen that out. And a little bit more in there. And same again down here. Like this. And with that done, what we now want to do is we want to create a roughly 6 parts contrast medium to 1 part Akhelian Green mix. And again, we don't want to use loads of this. What we want to do is we just want to add this Akhelian Green over about 2/3 of each of the areas that we've painted with the 2 layers of warp lightning green. Like this. And next up, once that's done, what we want to do is we want to use a little bit of Ork Flesh, not very much, straight out the pot, no medium. We want to add this to the darkest areas of this coruscating energy. So it's just like adding a little bit of shade in there like this. Like I said, we're not using very much from the pot at all, just a little bit. What we also want to do is we want to run this Ork Flesh into those recesses on the blade. Like that, just to create a little bit of shadow in there. And with that done, what we now want to do is create a roughly 10 parts contrast medium to 1 part Ork Flesh mix. And we want to use this all over the top of all of our colours, like this. And what this does, it just blends that pale Tesseract Glow in, and also strengthens up the darker areas. And with that done, what we're now going to do is we're going to highlight those blades. And the colour we're going to use for this is Corax White. Just want to take a small amount of Corax White and have at it. Just want to start hitting those edges like this. And with that done, the blades are now all finished across all 3 of our guys. So what we're going to do is we're just going to finish them off, and well, he's actually done. Would you believe it? You finished a whole model. Excellent. We just got the last little bit to do on these guys, and that is the black stone and this central bit here. And so what we want to do is we want to take some Akhelian Green, and we want to cover this all over that little section. Just there, straight out the pot. Don't need to thin it down or anything. Just be a little bit careful when you get close to any of that other detail you've already painted in. And with that Akhelian Green applied, what we now want to do is highlight it using some Corax White. And with that done, all that's left to do is to use some Tesseract Glow. Not very much at all. There it is. We just want to go over the top of those highlights, like this. And I nearly forgot to mention it. I knew I would. But there is actually one last little bit to do on Szarekh himself. And the colour is Shyish Purple. And the destination is those smooth cables on his tummy. And with those tummy cables done on Szarekh, well, our three little passengers are finished. So remember, we've got the cloak, got Szarekh, got these two Triarchal Phaerons, and we've also done the chariot. So, well, this whole thing is now pretty much finished apart from the base, which we're going to do a little bit later, because, well, we've got the Triarchal Menhirs to do. But yeah, let's just bask for a second in the glory of Szarekh, the Silent King. I've not actually glued them in just yet. I'm going to do that a little bit later. Hence why he's tilted out. And with that, part 2 is a wrap, and the model is spectacular once you get those passengers on. So you've got Szarekh and the two Triarchal Phaerons. One is like the Staff of Light and the Staff of Blades or something. I honestly do not know the names. I'm very, very sorry if I'm getting those completely wrong. I mean, there's not a lot else to say. I mean, the Zarekh's armour is an interesting challenge, particularly that fade on his headdress and the kind of sort of almost kind of sort of really worn out gold look of his armour rather than the bronze of the rest of the Zarakhan dynasty. But I think we've really nailed it here, and I love it. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to support me further like these legends on the screen, you can do so. Head to patreon.com/warhipster or head to ko-fi.com/warhipster. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Do all of that good stuff, and if you want to be kept up to date, make sure to click the bell icon. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.